I paid for my girlfriend's university tuition for years, sacrificing my youth and my health to build her a future, only for her to leave me a cold, callous letter stating, "The spark is gone," before she vanished to start a secret life with her university professor. Years later, after the glamour of her betrayal had undoubtedly rotted away, she crawled back and showed up at my door with his child in her arms, weeping and begging for me to take her back. I suppose that like many people who end up pouring their souls out and telling everything on a forum, my life took a jagged, unexpected, and profoundly painful turn that I never saw coming. I am not a special guy, nor do I claim to be a hero. I am just another man trying to get ahead in a world that doesn't give handouts. I am almost 30 years old now, and for a long, grueling time, my entire world revolved around her. We had been together since we first met at a humble part-time job, while we were both young and struggling, trying to figure out what to do with our lives after finishing school. We were young and naive, fueled by more dreams than actual money, and our backpacks were always loaded with the heavy difficulties we had witnessed in our own families, where economic stability was nothing more than a cruel pipe dream. Our parents, despite their desperate efforts, always struggled to make ends meet, and we grew up with the ironclad, firm determination to build something different, something solid, safe, and unbreakable for ourselves. Our relationship was built on that deep foundation of mutual understanding and a fierce, shared desire to progress beyond our circumstances. We understood each other on a level that didn't require words. We knew exactly what it meant to live with the constant shadow of uncertainty and a crippling lack of resources. That is why when we finally started living together in a small, cramped apartment, every single penny counted, and every financial decision was weighed with crucial importance. We were not planning on getting married right away because we knew we needed to be in a much stronger economic position first. We desperately wanted to avoid starting a marriage with the same suffocating pressures we had seen drown our parents and destroy their spirits. I eventually secured a job in the demanding construction industry. I started from the very bottom, of course, but it was a job that paid relatively well for someone without a formal university degree. It was hard, brutal work with long, punishing hours, often in difficult and dangerous conditions, but I put my entire heart into it every single day. I saw the potential to grow and to learn a trade that would always be in high demand. Meanwhile, she worked part-time and explored her various university options. I always knew she had a burning passion for history, for ancient civilizations, and for the romantic idea of unearthing the mysteries of the past. She dreamed of being a professional archaeologist, of traveling to faraway, exotic places, and of making important discoveries. I listened to her for hours, fascinated by her raw enthusiasm, although to me that world seemed like something out of the movies. But seeing her so passionate about something made me want to support her with everything I had in my soul. It was one day, after receiving my first significant big raise and a generous bonus for a job exceptionally well done, that I made a monumental decision. It was a decision that came from the absolute depths of my love for her and my selfless desire to see her happy, educated, and fulfilled. I knew that university, especially a specialized and prestigious career like archaeology, was expensive, far more expensive than we could ever hope to afford with our meager income at that time. But I had this new job, this golden opportunity to earn good money through sweat and overtime. I proposed something to her that day that left her completely speechless and trembling. I told her that I would take full responsibility for paying her university tuition, her books, and all her essential expenses so that she could dedicate herself to studying full-time. I wanted her part-time job to be just for her own extras or personal savings. I wanted to lift that crushing financial burden off her shoulders so she could pursue her dream without the constant, draining pressure of money. My girlfriend's reaction was one of total, overwhelming surprise and immense, tearful gratitude. She cried inconsolably, hugged me as if she would never let go, and thanked me over and over again until the words lost meaning. She told me I was the best man in the entire world and that no one had ever shown her that kind of devotion. Seeing her happiness and knowing that I could be the key to her pursuing her passion filled me with a deep satisfaction that money alone could never buy. I felt that we were more united than ever, a true team working toward a better future where we could both achieve our dreams. Our life took on a new, intense rhythm. I worked incredibly long hours, often returning home exhausted and covered in dust long after the sun had set. The bills, the rising rent, the food, and now the heavy university tuition, everything fell mainly on my aching shoulders. She, for her part, immersed herself deeply in her studies and continued with her part-time job, which gave her a sense of independence and helped her with her personal expenses. Despite the long hours and physical toll of the work, I was genuinely happy. I watched her progress and listened to her talk with infectious enthusiasm about her classes and the fascinating things she was learning. I felt that my effort had a tangible, noble purpose and that I was investing in the bedrock of our future. A few months later, she landed a much better job that was directly related to her field. She became a research assistant for a prominent professor at the university. This job not only provided her with more money, but it also offered her invaluable, real-world experience in archaeology and gave her more flexibility with her study schedules. We celebrated this achievement together with a small dinner, seeing it as one more step towards her dream and a small relief from the financial burden, although I remained the primary provider for everything essential. However, with this new job and the increasing intensity of her academic studies, I noticed that something subtle began to shift and change between us. It was not a change that happened overnight, but rather a slow, gradual distancing that felt like ice forming on a lake. We spent less time together, of course, due to my long work hours and her research, but the nights at home often found me exhausted on the couch, while she was completely engrossed in her books or academic reports. I felt that the distance went far beyond simple physical exhaustion. There was a subtle, growing coldness, less spontaneity, and a feeling that her mind was elsewhere, trapped in an academic world which I did not share in the same way. Every time I felt that distance growing, I tried to compensate for it with everything I had. I would buy her small, thoughtful gifts that I knew she liked, prepare special dinners when we had a rare free moment, and leave her affectionate notes around the apartment. I wanted to remind her every day how much I loved her, how proud I was of her achievements, and how important our relationship was to me. She appreciated it and was always polite, always greeting me with a smile, but sometimes I felt that her gratitude was merely for the gesture itself and not for the deep connection it was meant to represent. Despite this growing chasm, I trusted her completely. I knew she was under immense pressure, and I told myself it was just a temporary phase. I believed that once she graduated, we would have all the time in the world for each other. She would tell me she was simply exhausted when I asked if something was wrong, and I believed her because I loved her. I was investing my entire present in her future, which I believed was our future. I began to visualize that future in vivid detail. As her graduation approached, I had been working tirelessly, gaining experience in construction and making strategic contacts with major contractors and other professionals in the industry. I knew that if I got a university degree related to my work, my opportunities and my income would skyrocket. People in my field valued practical experience, but a degree opened doors to bigger projects and to positions of greater responsibility. So, I started planning my own university path, hoping to be able to combine work with study, just as she had done. My dream was becoming clearer and more real. I visualized the moment when we would both finally have our degrees and our careers taking off. We would get married. We would have the wedding we deserved without the financial worries that had held our families back. And then we would start our own family. We would have children and give them the stability and opportunities that we did not have. It was a simple dream, but for me, it meant building the home and the life I had always longed for. I was on the cusp of achieving it, feeling that all my sacrifices were about to pay off, that our bright future was just around the corner. I could not imagine anything that could derail that path. How wrong I was. Reality was about to hit me with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering not only my dreams, but also my trust in love and in the person to whom I had given the most. I came home that night later than usual after an exhausting day. Construction often involved extended shifts, and that day we had a problem on the site that kept us all there longer than planned. I was looking forward to getting to our apartment, taking off my boots, and disconnecting. When I opened the door, darkness and silence greeted me. Strange. Normally, she would have already arrived. The apartment was completely silent. I felt a slight panging of concern and checked the time on my phone. Yes, it was late, but much later than was usual for her. Honey, I called, my voice echoing in the unusual emptiness of the place. There was no answer. I left my backpack at the entrance and walked through the small apartment, checking the rooms, the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. I was alone. A feeling of unease began to grow in my chest. Maybe she had stayed at a friend's house to study, although she had not told me. That was strange for her. She was usually considerate with schedules, knowing that I would worry. My unease turned into a cold certainty when I entered the bedroom again and opened the closet. A large part of her clothes was gone. The shelves were strangely empty. In the bathroom, her personal belongings were not on the shelf. Her travel suitcase was not in its usual place. A dull panic began to rise in my throat. This was not just her staying out late. This was different. It seemed as if she had left. But why? Where? Without saying anything, I took out my phone. My hands trembled. I dialed her number. It rang, and then voicemail. I tried again, straight to voicemail. She sent it to voicemail. She did not want to talk to me. The certainty that something terrible was happening hit me hard. I walked aimlessly around the living room, my gaze stumbling upon the photos of us smiling, building our little nest. Nothing seemed real. It was then that I saw it. On the kitchen table, next to a small vase with dried flowers, was a white envelope with my name written on it by hand. Her handwriting. My heart gave a painful lurch. I opened the envelope and unfolded the sheet. Her words filled the silence of the apartment. She began by saying that it was difficult to write, that she was very sorry to do this to me, especially in this way. Then she went into the explanation. She said that for some time in recent months she had felt that our relationship had become monotonous, that the routine, the lack of spark had gradually pushed her away, that although she loved me and appreciated everything I did for her, the romantic love had been fading. I read those words and could not believe it. Monotony. After everything we were building, the sacrifices I was making, that was all a simple matter of spark? I felt a pain of pain and resentment. My effort, my dedication, my unconditional love were worthless. But the letter continued, and what came next was the blow that knocked me down completely. She said that at the university, in her history and archaeology studies, she had met someone, a professor, a man, according to her words, incredibly cultured and intelligent, with whom she could have conversations that challenged and inspired her. Someone who shared her passion for the past, and that over time, those conversations, that intellectual connection, had transformed into feelings. She had fallen in love with him. The words seemed to explode on the page. She had fallen in love with her professor, a man from the world that I had helped her reach. I felt a pain of betrayal so deep it almost took my breath away. Not only was she leaving me, but she was replacing me with someone from her new environment, someone who represented the world I had pushed her towards, but of which I was not a part. The man who opened her mind in the classrooms now apparently had also opened her heart. The letter ended by explaining why she was not facing me. She said she was too afraid of my reaction, that she knew it would hurt me a lot, and what was worse for her, she felt an immense shame for leaving me like this, especially knowing that I had been the one who had paid for her university, who had made sacrifices so she could follow her dream. She felt guilty for that, and that is why she did not dare to tell me in person. When I finished reading, the paper slipped from my trembling hands and floated to the floor. I stood there in the middle of the silence of the empty apartment with the words of her letter echoing in my head. The initial shock gave way to a wave of sadness and pain so intense that it doubled me over. I fell to my knees sobbing uncontrollably. The tears flowed in torrents and I felt like I was running out of air. My chest ached as if a knife had been stabbed into it. I could not breathe. Every breath was an agonizing effort. Sadness consumed me completely. It was the destruction of all my plans, all my sacrifices, all my hopes for a future together. Everything had crumbled in the instant I read those words. She, the person for whom I had worked to the point of exhaustion, the person in whom I had invested my money and my heart, had abandoned me for someone else, claiming monotony, and falling in love with a man from the world that I had financed for her. The cruelty of the situation, the bitter irony of having paid for the education that led her into the arms of another was tearing me apart inside. I felt like I was suffocating with the pain. In the midst of my desperation, I instinctively reached for my phone. I needed someone. Someone who knew who I was before this night. I dialed David, my closest friend. When he picked up, I could only manage a series of sobs and choked words, trying to explain that she had gone, that everything was over. As he tried to comfort me, I was left breathless, completely shattered in the apartment that was once our home, and was now just a monument to my broken dreams and my shattered heart. The weeks that followed were a personal hell. My close friend David did everything he could to comfort me. He let me stay on his couch for a few days. He listened to me. He reminded me of my worth. But despite his unconditional support, the pain consumed me. Every morning waking up was a reminder of the devastating reality. The empty apartment, her absence, the cruelty of the letter, the certainty that I had invested years of my life and my resources in a person who in the end had discarded me for monotony was an unbearable weight. I barely ate. I barely slept. I felt like I was suffocating with sadness, with the feeling of failure and betrayal. All those plans we had made together had vanished in an instant. The idea that the money I earned with so much effort, the long hours under the sun, in the cold, had gone to pay for the education that led her into the arms of another man, was a wound that opened up again and again. It felt like the biggest waste of my life. Inevitably, my emotional state began to affect my work. I was once diligent, but I was now distracted. I made silly mistakes, and my productivity plummeted. My bosses noticed. They called me into the office with serious faces. They asked if something was wrong, if I needed to take some time off. I gave them a very diluted version of the truth. They were understanding, but they made it clear that my performance had to improve. That conversation was a crucial moment. I looked at myself in the mirror, haggard and gaunt, a shadow of the man I used to be. I realized that if I continued like this, I would lose my job, the only stable foundation I had left. I had already lost my relationship and my dreams. I could not afford to lose my professional future and my financial security as well. It was a turning point. I decided at that moment that I would not sink completely. I would not give the pain the satisfaction of destroying me. It was not about forgetting. I knew that would take time. It was about compartmentalizing, putting the pain in a box, closing it as best I could, and moving forward with a cold and stoic determination. I had invested a lot in my future, and although the person with whom I had planned it was no longer there, the future itself still existed. The wasted money on her education hurt like hell, but I would not let it hold me back. I would see it as an expensive lesson. I redirected all my energy toward my work. I volunteered for the most difficult projects. I worked overtime voluntarily. I sought to learn new skills. I threw myself into my work to the point of physical exhaustion, using it as a way not to think, not to feel. I actively sought to expand my network of contacts in the industry, knowing that each connection could be an open door. It was no longer just about earning money. It was about building a fortress around myself, something tangible that could not be taken away by betrayal. To better manage my finances and prepare for the next step, my own university education, I made some difficult decisions. I sold some of the things we had bought together, objects that now only served as painful reminders. I left the apartment we shared and moved into a much smaller and cheaper one, conveniently located near my work to save on transportation and time. With the money from the sales and the savings on rent, I was able to start paying off a university loan I had taken out. Now, it was just my responsibility. And then I took the big step. I enrolled in university, starting my own path towards the degree I knew would catapult my career. I chose classes that I could balance with my demanding work schedule, and thus began a period of my life of relentless work and study. My days were an exhausting routine. Waking up before dawn, going to work, going to classes, coming home, studying until the early morning, sleeping a few hours, and starting all over again. I worked 4 times as hard as my university classmates who did not have to maintain a full-time job. There was no time for anything else. My social life was reduced to zero. I did not go out. I did not go to parties. I barely saw David from time to time for a quick coffee. Romantic relationships were completely off the table. Although there were women who showed interest, I simply did not have the capacity. The wound of my ex's betrayal was still fresh, and the idea of trusting someone in that way again was terrifying to me. I had built a wall around myself, dedicating every ounce of my energy to building my future. It was a lonely path dictated by the pain of the past and the determination to build a future in which I depended only on my own effort. I would not allow anything or anyone to have the power to destroy my life in that way again. The months stretched on into years of relentless work and study. My routine was exhausting, designed to squeeze every productive minute out of the day. I would get up early to go to the construction site or the office. My job had both aspects depending on the project. I would spend the afternoon at the university, and the nights I would dedicate to studying in my small apartment. My social life had been reduced to the necessary interaction with my work colleagues and my professors. I did not see my old friends at all. It was not that I had an active resentment. I simply did not have time. My focus was singular. Work, study, build my future. Everything else was a distraction I could not afford. In the midst of this self-imposed isolation, my phone, which rarely rang for anything other than work, began to receive messages from an unknown number at first, which I later identified. It was from Maria, my ex-girlfriend Sarah's best friend. The first messages were cautious, asking how I was. I did not respond. Then they became a little more frequent. As soon as I saw who it was, I knew immediately that it was Sarah trying to find out about me without having to face me directly. Her best friend was her emissary. I did not feel anger when I realized this. I felt a cold confirmation. Confirmation that despite everything, something was driving her to know. But I had no interest in her knowing how I was. I did not want her pity. I did not want her to think I was doing badly or well. I firmly decided to ignore all of Maria's calls and messages. Maintaining that boundary was crucial for my own healing process. This strategy of ignoring worked for several weeks. The messages became less frequent. I thought maybe she had gotten the message. But one day, while I was engrossed in my studies, someone knocked on my door. A persistent knock. I opened the door slightly annoyed, and there standing in the hallway was Maria. She was visibly surprised to see me. I guess my appearance reflected the exhaustion of my endless days. "Maria," I said, my voice tired but firm with no trace of the anger or pain I used to feel. "I know you have been trying to contact me, and I know it is not just you. I know it is Sarah who wants to know how I'm doing." I looked her directly in the eyes. "I have not answered you because I do not have time, and frankly I'm not interested either." I continued to explain my situation in a direct way without seeking sympathy. "I'm working. I'm studying. My days are long and exhausting. Every free minute I have I dedicate to trying to move forward in my life. I do not have time for the past." I was very clear on this last point. Sarah decided to leave my life in a very definitive way, and I have accepted that decision. I have no interest in hearing about her, or in her hearing about me. What was meant to be was. Things were said and done. Maria tried to argue with a tone that sought to soften the situation. "But you should not be so harsh. Sarah cares about you. She is fond of you. Do you matter to her?" Her words sounded empty to me. Fondness. Mattering to her. I repeated without sarcasm, just with a coldness of statement. "Maria, the person for whom I paid for university, the person with whom I planned my future, left me a letter saying she was bored and left with her professor without daring to face me because of the shame of what she owed me. That is not fondness. That is something else. And whether I matter to her or not now is completely irrelevant to me." I stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. "I appreciate you being concerned, Maria, but my life now is this work and study. I'm on a different path, far from the past. Please tell Sarah that I'm fine or not fine, whatever she wants to believe, but I do not want any more contact. And you live your life. Move on. I already have." Maria stood there for a second, looking a little stunned by my frankness and my apparent lack of emotion. She nodded slowly. seeming to understand that my decision was firm. "Okay," she said in a low voice. "I understand." She turned around and left the apartment. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment. I felt a wave of relief. I had cut the last thread that tied me to the past. No more emissaries. No more attempts at contact. I had defended my space, my time, my peace of mind. I sat down again at my study table, looking at the books and notes. The loneliness of the apartment did not feel empty now. It felt like my own. It was my space to rebuild, free from the shadows and complications of the past. The road was hard, yes, but now finally, I felt that I was walking it completely alone, depending only on myself. And that after all was exactly what I needed. The months turned into almost a couple of years of that exhausting routine. Work, study, work, study. The weekends were just an extension of this discipline, dedicated to university projects or extra shifts at my job to cover expenses and continue saving. My social life remained on hold. My friend David was still my only regular contact outside of the work and academic sphere, and our conversations continued to be necessary anchors. I did not hear from Maria again, which meant that Sarah had not tried to contact me through her again. During all this time, my focus on my studies was total. I did not go to university just to hang out. I went with a purpose. Every class, every assignment, every exam was an opportunity to absorb knowledge that I knew I would apply directly in my career. My years of practical experience in construction gave me an advantage. I could understand theoretical concepts by seeing them applied in the real world. This combination of experience and academic dedication began to make me stand out. My professors began to notice me. They saw that I not only got good grades, but I also participated actively and showed a deep understanding of the subject matter. It was at the beginning of my final year when one of my main professors, a highly respected figure in my field, let us call him Professor Evans, called me after a class. I thought maybe he wanted to talk about an assignment. But what he proposed far exceeded any expectation. He invited me to join a very important research and development project that he and other professors were working on in collaboration with a company in the sector. It was a cutting-edge project, something that could have a significant impact on our industry. I felt a wave of pure excitement. It was an incredible opportunity to apply what I was learning at a much higher level, to work side by side with experts, and to make contacts that would be worth gold. I did not hesitate for a second. I thanked Professor Evans profusely and assured him that I would dedicate myself to the project with all my effort. This was the tangible reward for my sacrifices. Accepting to join the project meant adding another layer of demand to my already saturated routine. My schedule became inhuman. I would go from the construction site to the university, from the university to project meetings, and the few hours I had left, I would dedicate to studying for my classes or working on the project's deliverables. Sleep became a rare and precious luxury. I often found myself working or studying until the early hours of the morning, waking up a few hours later to start the cycle all over again. Physical exhaustion was constant. There were moments when the fatigue overwhelmed me, when I wondered if all this extreme effort was worth it, but then I would remind myself why I was doing it. I knew that the experience I was gaining, combined with my degree and my practical experience, would make me a highly valued professional. The current sacrifice, the lack of sleep, the absence of a personal life were a necessary investment in that future. I was not going to let the betrayal of the past define my destiny. Working on the project with the professors was an accelerated learning experience. It exposed me to complex problems and to a way of thinking that elevated my understanding of my field to a new level. I was not just learning, I was contributing in a significant way. My practical experience turned out to be invaluable for the research team, helping to bridge the gap between theory and real application. The professors valued my perspective, my work ethic, and my dedication. I was building not only experience, but a solid reputation among people who mattered in my industry. And although I did not know it at the time, this project and the connections I was forging would be the springboard that would take me much further than I had ever imagined, paving the way for the kind of financial and professional success I had dreamed of and beyond. Graduation was approaching, and with it the promise that this period of titanic effort was about to take a transformative turn. The years passed, a relentless cycle of work, study, projects, and very little sleep. My life had become a constant marathon, but the end was in sight. Graduation, the moment for which I had worked tirelessly since I decided to invest in myself after my world fell apart. The anticipation was mixed with a deep exhaustion. Graduation day arrived. It was a crowded event for most, full of proud families. For me, it was a little different. My parents were not present. The only people in the stands waiting for me with genuine smiles were David and Professor Evans, along with two other professors who had been key to the project. It was a small group, yes, but their presence meant more to me than a stadium full of faces. Their support, their faith in me was all I needed. Upon receiving my diploma, I felt a wave of pride, not for the piece of paper itself, but for what it represented, years of sacrifice, of overcoming despair, of building something solid from nothing. I had achieved it solely through my own effort and the timely help of a few. After the ceremony, Professor Evans and my other partners approached. They congratulated me effusively on my graduation and above all on my exceptional work on the project, and then they gave me the news that would transform my future overnight. The project we had been working on tirelessly had been a resounding success, not only at a research level, but commercially. They had secured significant funding, and as a result the project had officially become a company, a real company with the potential for massive growth in our industry. And my role in that company far exceeded anything I could have anticipated. They offered me to be the head of a key area, an area that I had helped develop with my practical experience and my vision. But not only that, in recognition of my fundamental contributions, they offered me to become a partner in the company, an owner. And to complete the picture, they invited me to join the board of directors. I went from being a part-time student with a full-time job to being a partner, a boss, and a board member of a promising new company. They told me to take a week to rest, and then we would sit down to formally negotiate my contract, my salary as head of the area, and crucially, my percentage of profits as a partner. They gave me an estimate of what that would represent in terms of annual income, and the figure was astronomical, something I never thought I would earn in my entire life, let alone at my age. I was stunned, dizzy. The financial security I had always sought was not only within reach, it had become an overwhelming and wonderful reality. I felt immense gratitude for the professors who had believed in me and a deep pride in myself for having persevered. All the sacrifices, all the pain, all the wasted money in the past. At this moment, everything seemed justified by this incredible reward. That night, we had a celebration dinner with David, Professor Evans, and the other partners. We toasted to the company, to the future, and to my graduation. I returned to my small, modest apartment that night with my head full of amazing figures and exciting plans. Despite the magnitude of my imminent success, my home was still that functional and uninspiring space I had chosen out of economic necessity. The coldness of her proposal, though wrapped in tears and words of love, made me pull my hands back abruptly. I felt an icy calm descend over me. It was time to speak my truth, not to hurt her as she had hurt me, but to bring a definitive closure. I looked into her eyes without anger, only with a deep and weary disappointment. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, "I have heard your story, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that your path was not what you expected." I paused. "But when you left, you did not just take your things. You took all the plans we had made, all the hopes I had for us." I told her about the family I wanted to build, about the secure life I imagined, about how my effort was directed towards that goal with her. "And you threw it all away for an adventure and the empty promise of some guy." She tried to interrupt, crying harder, apologizing again. But I continued to speak with a determination that came from years of lonely struggle. "It does not matter anymore, Sarah. Your apologies, your belated regret, do not change what happened. They do not undo the pain. They do not rebuild the years I spent picking up the pieces and building my life anew." I looked at her, and at that moment I saw with total clarity the path I had traveled alone. I realized something very important when I was at the bottom alone working and studying to the point of exhaustion. I realized that the only person I needed to achieve my goals was myself, that I could build my own life, my own success depending solely on my own effort and my own determination. I pointed towards the door, my voice firm. "I'm sorry for the situation you are in, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the child. But he has a father. A father who, however irresponsible he may be, is his father, and I'm not him. I cannot be responsible." I took out my wallet. I gave her a considerable amount of money. "This is to help you get to your parents' house so you can start over there." I stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. "But this is all, Sarah. This is over. You left my life a long time ago, and I do not want you to be a part of it again, ever." She stood up too, the tears streaming down her face, reaching out her hands again, begging desperately. "Please, for our name, please forgive me. We can be a family. You are successful now. We can have the life you dreamed of. I love you. We can try again." Her pleas echoed in the small apartment. But I remained motionless, impassive in the face of her tears, recognizing the desperation of the situation, but also the underlying interest in her voice. She wanted the life I had built, not necessarily me. I did not respond. I did not yield. I simply maintained my posture, my firm gaze, until she finally understood that my decision was unshakable. She picked up her sleeping son, and between sobs left the apartment. I closed the door behind her, and a deep, and this time complete, and healing silence enveloped me. I was left alone in the apartment feeling the weight of all the years of struggle, of pain, of sacrifice. And at that moment, I realized that finally, I had closed that cycle. I had faced the past, the person who had caused me so much harm. And I had reacted not from the anger or desperation of before, but from the strength and clarity I had gained. I had proven both to her and to myself that her betrayal had not destroyed me. Now my life was in an incredible place. I had a promising career, a partnership in a growing company, a financial security that surpassed my wildest dreams. And yes, I was getting to know that woman from my industry, intelligent, funny, who had also made it on her own. Our conversations were stimulating, our connection genuine. Life was moving on. Over time, I found out through casual channels that Sarah was living with her parents and working a job that barely allowed her to get by. I felt neither rejoicing nor deep pity, just one more confirmation of the reality I had expressed that night. Actions have consequences. Each person decides their own destiny through the decisions they make. She made hers, seeking adventure and easy glamour, and I made mine, choosing perseverance and solitary construction. In the end, we both reaped what we sowed. And I, finally, free from the weight of the past, was ready to fully enjoy the life it had cost me so much to build, knowing that things, despite everything, really did get better. Is it true love if she only realizes your worth after the man she left you for abandons her? Or is she just looking for a new benefactor to fund the life her spark couldn't provide? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.